This is Mark Strassman, reporter with Etopia News' Peak Oil Global Warming Channel. We're in Huntington Beach, California, and we're about to speak to Debbie Cook, who's a city council member here. Welcome to the Peak Oil Global Warming Channel.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Tell us about your website, how to find it, and what's there.
The ASPA website?
The website that you've got with a lot of little links to a lot of little things.
My little one-page website.
Right. Tell us the URL and tell us what's there.
It's http://web.mac.com/energyinfo, and I do have links to probably 15 to 20 interesting articles on oil-related issues.
And have you set that up on your own or with the City of Huntington Beach? Or?
Oh, no, this is all my own.
Okay. Tell us, for people who are in the Southern California area and those who aren't, where is Huntington Beach, and characterize the community for us, if you could.
Well, Huntington Beach is on the coast south of Long Beach. It's 27 square miles, 8.5 miles of beach, and a population of about 200,000.
Okay. Where does its energy come from? And talk a little bit about the energy profile for Huntington Beach, where it gets its electricity, where it gets its gasoline, and how it stacks up to other communities in the profile of its energy usage.
Well, we're probably pretty typical with most cities in Southern California, a mix of electricity from Edison or another provider, gas from the gas company, fuels for our police and public works vehicles, and helicopters and that sort of thing. It's pretty typical, I think, of most cities.
Okay, let's talk about your origins, the origins of your interest in peak oil. What do you attribute it to, and tell us the history of it?
Well, I actually have a bachelor's degree in earth science, but several years ago, one of the staff people from Interior COG, a Council of Governments, we happened to be talking. I found out he had a background in geology and actually had spent a day as a graduate student, I think, with M. King Hubbard. And he mentioned a term that I'd never heard before called rollover. And I only kind of vaguely understood what he was talking about. But after that, a little bit after that, I heard a program on National Public Radio about Matt Simmons' new book, Twilight in the Desert. And that's really what sparked this. And
you were already a city council person at the time?
Yes, I was, and I'm also a member of the Southern California Association of Governments Regional Council.
And what were your immediate thoughts in terms of the peak oil and what it might mean for your activities as an elected official in Southern California?
Well, as a member of the Regional Council, we are responsible for the transportation planning for all of Southern California except for San Diego County. So it's a very large area. It impacts 18 million people, and obviously the ramifications of peaking in world oil production are significant.
So talk about these groups that you're in and what their authority and responsibility is in terms of transportation policy.
Well, SCAG writes transportation policy as well as housing policy, and we're now currently updating our energy policy. But they are responsible for the funding of transportation projects in Southern California. So basically all of the projects have to be approved through the SCAG process.
And how many people are on that board, and how much authority does it have in the context of state and local authority?
Well, it doesn't have authority to dictate people's, for example, energy policy, that sort of thing. But we do, because they are responsible for funding, transportation programs have to be on their list to be funded.
Do they decide whether Caltrans is going to spend money on a freeway or a light rail system or anything along those lines?
Well, they don't decide which projects, but Caltrans or more specifically, OCTA or MTA would come forward with projects, and they would have to be part of the transportation plan. Because we have a lot of goals, some of which are to reduce air quality emissions, and so we're looking for projects that do that as well as move traffic.
And how big is that board, and how do people get put on it?
Well, they're all elected officials, and they represent districts within the region. There are probably around 70 members of the board. It's a very large board.
Right.
But they are elected officials, and they are appointed basically by their district.
Okay, and what would you say the level of awareness of peak oil is among these officials?
Well, that's what I've been kind of working on for the last year, is raising that awareness. And with SCAG, we organized an energy conference last March, and it was very successful. And then yesterday we flew out a professor from Boston University, Robert Kaufman, who will be speaking at the ASPO Boston University Conference, October 25 to 27. And he was fabulous, and he presented a great presentation to the SCAG board about peak oil
You want to give us a little summary of what he said and what their reaction to what he said was?
Well, he's obviously very data-driven and modeling and that sort of thing, very much tied into banking and markets and that sort of stuff. So I think it was a message that resonated with these elected officials, and they are becoming more concerned that we need to act, and we need to act aggressively regarding our energy future.
How aggressively did he recommend that people act? Did he make recommendations or just give background?
No, he didn't. He just gave information.
How aggressively do you think it's necessary to act now in terms of planning for energy needs in the future on the basis of a peak oil scenario?
Well, personally, I mean, coupled with climate change,
right.
I don't think you can act aggressively enough, and,
right.
and that's the problem. We don't really have the leadership that is out there saying we need to do something, and we need to do it now.
Let's assume you were the energy czar of Southern California. What kind of policies would you like to see implemented? Be as broad or as detailed as you want in terms of transportation and planning and housing and energy use in general.
Well, we need to get away from our auto-centric culture. I mean, that would be very important, but also how we develop land. Developing around transportation nodes would be very important to reduce auto travel.
So the experience that I just had driving from the eastern San Fernando Valley down the 405 into Orange County, surrounded by billions of dollars worth of cars and development based on cars, are you saying that that's unsupportable right now?
Well, I think
and going forward, or do you think it should be modified slightly or replaced drastically, or what's your take on this Southern California car culture and the economy that's grown up around it?
Well, I mean, I think you just proved coming down here today that it's a failed system.
Right.
And so we've got to get away from that and move people in other ways that are more efficient. I'm not sure that government won't be able to accomplish that.
Right.
The public has to understand they have a problem and also participate in driving that.
Well, as no pun intended, of course, about driving, I see there are three elements here. There's government, there's business, and there's individuals. What do you see as the respective roles of those three entities in any kind of transformation, and how poised to make a transformation do you see those groups?
Well, I think government has the responsibility to make people aware of the problems, and I don't think they really do that well. I think they try to push solutions before people understand they have a problem. I mean, nobody makes a special trip to the drugstore to buy aspirin if they don't have a headache. And so people need to understand that they do have a headache, and they need to be part of the solution. And then, of course, educating business on what the implications are in their sector. But the public has to be the biggest part of the solution.
Well, okay. Well, then let's talk about the psychology of the public. Where do you feel the public is right now on the issue of peak oil? In Huntington Beach or Southern California or the country generally?
Everywhere the public is confused,
right.
Because they hear one day that we're running out of oil, which
right.
is really not what peak oil is all about.
Right.
And then the next day they hear that, we've had this massive find in Texas, and so
or Jack 2 in the Gulf.
Yes, excuse me. And we're everything's fine.
Right.
So they're very confused. They don't understand energy.
The public wants cheap energy. They want low gasoline prices, and they cheer and they're happy and they vote for the incumbents when they have it, and they get angry and upset and vote the incumbents out when they don't. And yet, cheap energy is the problem, not the solution, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I was laughing this morning as people were celebrating that gas prices are going down.
Right.
And that's the worst thing that could happen.
Talk about the relationship between cheap energy and the substitution of alternative energy for gasoline and other fossil fuels.
Well, I don't believe there is a substitute for gasoline.
Right.
Certainly not one that's as rich as gasoline
right.
is. And to think otherwise also confuses and clouds the issue and makes people realize that there is a solution and that technology will save us.
Do you feel that there's adequate basis for thinking that solar thermal and solar photovoltaic and Stirling engines and wind and biomass and so on can substitute for a significant portion of the energy that we use now?
Well,
given an all-out World War II level government commitment of subsidies and building of those kinds of systems?
well, possibly if you have 50 years. In the short term, I don't think so.
Okay. In the short term, what do you think is the best strategy?
Conservation is what's going to be the best strategy.
Okay. Well, then that comes down to individual buying decisions and consuming decisions, right?
Yes, and so who's leading the charge to
Right.
make people understand?
Who is?
Very few people, and certainly not people that need to be doing it, not the elected officials.
How about the media? How about
The media is doing a terrible job because they're the ones confusing the issue, and they're also not covering international energy issues.
How about the local television stations, which have 85% car commercials funding them, and who never do a story about peak oil?
Absolutely, they're not getting the word out.
Okay. Well, we painted a bleak picture. What are you doing, and what are you recommending people do who care about the problems posed by peak oil?
Well, people need to decide that they're going to make a decision to drive less and to change their eating habits and doing things that actually make an impact on our energy future.
Are there ordinances pending that you've introduced into the Huntington Beach City Council that would move things in the right direction?
I'm waiting till after the election.
Oh, tell us a little about the election. Is peak oil an issue in the Huntington Beach City Council election coming up in November?
No, not per se.
All right. Is it implicitly in some ways? Are there some candidates who are more oriented to the issue than others?
Well, probably,
right.
But this is something that it takes a while sometimes to convince people that they need to take action.
All right.
So,
what about local businesses, either small businesses in the area or big corporations that are headquartered here? What kind of spectrum is there of ones that are doing nothing, ones that are doing a lot?
Well, obviously, I don't have a handle on what everyone's doing,
right.
Especially in the business sector. But I know Sharp Solar's headquartered here in Huntington Beach.
Okay.
So
let's give them a plug. What do they make, and what's important about it?
Oh, well, they make Sharp solar panels.
Right.
And actually installed their panels several years ago in my house. And
how about the this City Hall building? I mean, it looks pretty modern. Does it have solar
we
panels
do not,
on it?
although we did just complete an energy audit of all of our facilities.
Right.
And so we are going to be implementing a number of energy efficiency programs.
All right. What would you like to see this? Are you happy on the state level? Governor Schwarzenegger signed a 1 million solar roofs bill. He signed a greenhouse gas cap. Do you think these are steps in the right direction?
Some steps in the right direction, others that are not.
Which aren't?
The hydrogen, this idea that our hydrogen highway
right.
is, I think, misguided.
Poke a hole in it. Tell people what's wrong with the hydrogen highway.
Well, hydrogen, yes, we need to do a lot of research and development. I don't think hydrogen is going to be a fuel source for automobiles, perhaps for storing energy for buildings and that sort of thing. But,
right.
It is so far out there. I think what's pushing it really is a research and development gravy train, and there's no downside for people to exploit it.
Okay. Speaking of research and development gravy trains, what's your view on Prop 87, the Clean Alternative Energy Initiative?
Oh, gosh, I don't really want to get into that whole mess. I mean, I think that the people behind it probably are well-intentioned. I don't know that it accomplishes all that it needs to. However, I'm also aware that we need to do something. So
in terms of the confusion you talked about, the proponents of Proposition 87 argue explicitly with these words in their ads that voting yes on 87 will provide cheap energy for your SUVs. Whereas the oil companies that are opposing Prop 87 argue that implementing it will do the bad thing of raising energy costs and raising gasoline prices at the pump. Is this a wacky, weird reversal of who's saying what about the situation in ways that seem counterintuitive to you at all?
Well, how is the money going to be directed? What kind of alternatives are they going to work on?
What's your understanding? I've tried reading the bill. It's 40 pages long. It's extremely obscure. I don't know whether they're going to help people buy solar panels or give money to research institutes in the Midwest to develop cellulosic ethanol
well, it's certainly no way to legislate. The public can't read 40 pages, and I mean, you can't even understand them. The public's not going to understand them.
Is that an indictment of the elected officials who aren't taking action?
Well, We put the elected officials in office.
Is it an indictment of the voters who put
yes.
the voters who put those elected officials in?
Well, and not just the people they put in,
right.
the system, with term limits
right.
and
the system of campaign contributions,
being rewarded, and yes, all of those
who pays
things.
for the advertising, and how much the media allow
yes.
discussions and
right.
so on.
Right, but that doesn't mean it can't be changed. That doesn't mean the public can't be educated.
What's your strategy for educating the public beyond talking to me, telling people to listen to you on this recording, and saying that it seems like none of the players out there are really proactively doing anything?
Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge our piece of the mess, and we can. I, as an individual, can only do so much. I'm already spending 6 to 8 hours a week on this issue, but trying to get people to recognize that a technical fix isn't going to be the answer. They have to make changes to their lifestyle. And they have to also take part in trying to change things and get out there.
Do you think people will need to reduce, or you provide the word, whether they reduce their consumption, reduce the quality of life that they experience, or what's your take on the impact of peak oil on lifestyles of people in the U.S.?
Well, it's highly uncertain. We really don't. We can't predict what's going to happen with higher energy prices, but I think this last summer was an indication that of how unpredictable things really can be. It's certainly, we have used energy, we've gotten drunk on cheap energy, and it's going to be a long, hard hangover that we have to deal with.
You mentioned the ASPO conference in Boston. You're going to be there?
Yes, I will be there.
You're going to be making a presentation of some kind?
I'm moderating a panel.
What's the panel about?
It's about public policy and local government reaction or actions that they can take. And
are you going to be talking about some of the same issues we're talking about here right now?
Yes.
Who are the other people on the panel that you know
so
of
far,
now?
Mark Pisano, who is the executive director of the Southern California Association of Governments, he'll be speaking, and Julian Darley, author of High Noon for Natural Gas, Richard Heinberg, author of Power Down and a number of other books, Randy Udall with CORE. He's also a founding member of ASPO USA. So.
And what are the specific? Do you have an agenda yet for the talk, or you talk to the people there? Do you have your talking points ready yet? Or
No, I don't. Only briefly, if we talked about my panel.
Talk more broadly about the ASPO conference, where it is, when it is, and if you know how people can register for it or follow it.
Yes. Well, the ASPO website is www.aspo-usa.com. And they can get the link to the conference. The conference last year in Denver is really what got me so motivated and so energized to get more involved in these issues.
Say a little bit more about who was there at the conference last year and what kind of issues were raised and what kind of momentum there was leaving that conference.
It was incredible energy that was generated at an energy conference.
Right.
Roscoe Bartlett, congressman who has been such a great leader in this issue. Albert Bartlett was honored for his tremendous work, and he has some great information on the linked to at my website if people are interested. Mike Pacheco from the National Renewable Energy Lab, Roger Bezdek, who was one of the authors on the Hirsch Report.
Tell people what the Hirsch Report is.
Well, the Hirsch Report was commissioned by the Department of Energy, and it studies the implications, mitigation, risks from the peaking of world oil production. There's a new version of it just out in, I think it was May or June of this year, and that's available online and download as a PDF file.
And what were the main themes at last year's ASPO conference?
Well, for me, it was really my introduction to all of the issues surrounding peak oil. The geology involved, all the difficulties. So it was bringing together all of these wonderful ideas and people to discuss this issue and a wide variety of opinions.
What's the theme of this year's ASPO conference?
Well, it's titled "A Midnight Ride for Peak Oil," I believe.
Right.
That's it. And I mean, it's not. I don't know if I would phrase it as a theme so
right.
much as just a broad topics: oil and gas depletion, mitigation, economics, transportation, net energy.
How would you characterize the peak oil movement in terms of its effectiveness, its organization, its decentralization, its leadership? Talk about it as a movement and where you think it stands in terms of what it needs to accomplish.
Well, I don't know if I'd call it a movement as
Okay.
much as an awareness.
Right, okay.
And it's just fascinating to have watched this over the last year or two, and how the energy around peak oil has really gained, and people are really making a difference. I'm seeing it as I research cities across the United States and what they're doing.
What cities, from your vantage point here as an elected official in Huntington Beach, do you see as leaders in the peak oil preparedness
Well, certainly
movement?
you'd have to mention Portland first.
Right.
They really have taken the lead. But a lot of cities are getting on. Chicago, Austin, Santa Monica.
What are they doing that you like?
Well, they're acknowledging the problem. I mean, that's the first thing, is you have to acknowledge the problem. But they're also addressing it in the terms of how they build their infrastructure, and how their cities are constructed, and trying to develop policies and programs.
This is the Peak Oil Global Warming Channel. Could you compare the educational efforts and the activism around peak oil with the comparable activities in terms of global warming, and particularly since the last 10 years essentially have been spent in debating the controversy over whether global warming is happening and whether human activity is responsible for it, which has delayed any kind of action about it for 10 years. Compare that with what's happening with peak oil, whether people think it's a fact, a theory, not true, or just what they think of it.
Well, yes, people do try to confuse the issue by... It reminds me a lot about the global warming argument. And it is difficult, once somebody, as Mark Twain said, truth puts on its shoes, lies halfway around the world, or something like that. But it's...
A lie can go halfway around the world before truth puts on its shoes.
Yes.
Right.
So it's really difficult to, especially because it's such a complex matter. It's
Right.
not just geology. It's about politics
Right.
and wars and all
Right.
kinds of things, weather. So it's a complex issue, and the public can't grasp it in a 20-second soundbite. So it has a lot of the similarities of global warming.
Do you think that there are similar forces who argued that there is no global warming, who are now arguing that there is no peak oil?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know that much about it, but yes, there are people who are very concerned. The Saudis are very concerned about energy collapse in the oil market.
Those were the Saudis who led OPEC in announcing yesterday they were going to raise prices?
Yes.
Do you see that as greed or provision for peak oil, or both?
Well, the infrastructure for oil is only getting more expensive, and they need to be able to assure themselves they're going to have a profit to put in the investments. So,
Right.
The way we pay for oil and gas exploration and all of that sort of thing is rather odd, but that's not going to change. But there are a lot of people who are concerned that they might see a collapse in oil demand, which I kind of find absurd. But so they're acting in their own best economic interests.
We talked a little bit about, or a lot about Huntington Beach and local activities, a little bit about the state. What would you like to see the U.S. government, the Congress, and the executive branch be doing about peak oil now and going forward?
Well, certainly I would like to see the president do more than just say we're addicted to oil, and actually explains how precarious the situation is, because I think that would make people actually take notice and begin to address their own personal choices and how they can change things.
Given the president's background in the oil industry and the vice president's background in the oil industry, how likely do you think that is?
I really can't say.
Do you think that presidential leadership is important in this effort? To make people aware of peak oil?
I do think it's important. I mean, obviously, senators and congressmen can do a lot too, but we need to stop arguing about whether it's a theory or not.
Right.
I mean, energy, everything peaks and begins to fall. So, move on.
Do you think that a federal excise tax on gasoline on the order of $1 or $2 to bring prices in the U.S. up to where they are in Europe would make any sense and would be politically feasible?
Well, I'm not an economist. I really
Right.
couldn't begin to decide whether that's a good idea or not a good idea.
Okay. I'm trying to find out where you think the action is going to be going forward in the next few years in terms of peak oil if elected officials aren't taking leadership, and if the media is asleep, and if the public isn't too aware either. What's going to... And gasoline prices have fallen 50 cents in the last month, so So everyone's lulled back into suspended animation.
Well,
do you think
that's only temporary?
Well, okay.
But elected officials, I mean, many of them are taking notice and
Right.
they are doing good things. So I don't want to impugn the integrity of all elected
Right.
officials. But we need some really top-level officials to really get involved and be a little bit more upfront with the facts. And that includes people from the Department of Energy or the California Energy Commission and some of the agencies that could do a lot.
Would it help, or how do you see the possibility of making peak oil and related issues important issues in the political campaigns that are going on right now, say for Congress and in the campaign for president in 2008?
Well, a politician spends a year finding out what the public thinks, and then they send them another year telling them what they just told them.
Right.
So it's until the public drives the politicians to talking about these issues, I don't think that they're going to start doing it on their own. You don't win election by telling people they're going to run out of energy.
Then how are the people going to come to realize that they're running out of energy and need to do something about it if the people who are elected to make the policies don't have a mandate and haven't even been raising the issue one way or the other?
Yeah, how do you get people to act outside of their own self-interest?
From what we're saying, it is in their self-interest. It's everyone's long-term self-interest.
It isn't a long-term, but
right.
You're elected to a 4-year or 2-year term.
Right.
Some electeds are taking that leadership position, and even some oil companies. John Hofmeister with Shell has said we need to think differently about energy in the way we drive and live and work. So it's coming from a lot of sources.
How sanguine are you that something's going to be done in time?
In time? Oh, I'm not sure in time, but can we soften the blow?
Right.
I think we can soften the blow.
How bad do you think things could get if nothing is done?
Well, all you have to do is look at Cuba and how bad things got there, or how bad things got in North Korea. That's how bad things can get.
And what's the trade-off between acting sooner and having worse results or better results?
Well, acting sooner means that we have more time to go to the renewables like solar and wind and wave and whatever else we can come up with. But it also it takes a long time. Look how long it's taken people to go from VHS to DVDs. It takes decades.
In a best-case scenario, where do you see Huntington Beach in 10 years in terms of its energy ecology and where it gets its energy and how it's organized and how people live in Huntington Beach in say, 2015, 2016?
Probably the most difficult part is housing, and how do you house people so they can live close to where they work?
Right.
And that's a huge challenge, and that's not one that takes, that takes many, many decades.
Do you think telecommuting has a role to play? If I had the proper equipment in Studio City, I would have been able to, and you had the proper equipment here, I could have done this interview with electrons going back and forth over the internet rather than me driving for 80 miles today. What's the City of Huntington Beach doing for its own employees or other companies in the city in terms of facilitating telecommuting as a policy that would cut down on energy usage and solve the problem of work residents commuting?
Well, I think we will get a lot more interested in telecommuting as time goes on. We are trying to work on ways to help our long-distance commuters either carpool or work those issues out. We have quite a few firefighters who live inland, and so we're
firefighting is clearly something you can't do by telecommuting.
No, but they don't have to. If you change their hours, their
right.
working hours, they
right.
maybe only have to come in. Definitely less often than usual.
How carbon neutral is the city of Huntington Beach?
We're not very carbon neutral. We have a long way to go, just like most cities.
How carbon neutral are you, and what are you doing to reduce your burden on the ecosphere?
Well, I did install solar panels,
right.
And I've ripped out the grass in my backyard, putting in native plants.
Right.
I also take mass transit whenever I can. I always take the Blue Line down to Los Angeles for my meetings, but I have to drive all the way to Long Beach to get the train. So hopefully someday we'll have the ability to get on a bus or a train and get connected to where we need to go.
So everyone seems to end interviews these days by asking people how hopeful they are and how optimistic they are, which are apparently different things. How hopeful are you that something is going to be done, and how optimistic are you that something will be done to mitigate the effects of peak oil?
Well, I don't know how hopeful or optimistic I am, but I'm having a lot of fun trying. So, who knows? I think people can react very quickly when they see a crisis, and so I think it's going to take a crisis to really get short term solutions.
Okay.
in place.
End up with a final plug for the ASPO conference and tell people how they can get more information about it.
It'll be the best conference of your life, and it's in Boston, October 25 through 27. It starts in the evening of the 25th. They can get information at aspo-usa.com. It's a not-to-be-missed conference.
Thanks very much for talking to us today on the Peak Oil Global Warming Channel.
Thank you.